It's always a huge stuff to do between panels. Some of you are coming back. Really nice to have you again here. For all of you who are asking yourselves what will be now happening, we'll be singing, ladies and gentlemen. And the song goes, I'm calling SOS, but not to the world, but to some very nice, as they said, values that we'll share here in Europe, especially in Western values we'll be talking about. So, the SOS time starts now with the Western values in distress, in front of lovely people who will be answering a few dozen questions in a short matter of time, because they know how much the cocktail party is important, and of course the OECD part as well, which arrives after this panel. So clap your hands for our guests arriving from US Congress, representative of the DBA, Chrissy Houlihan, joining us. Welcome, nice to have you. This is your spot. Welcome to Croatia. Then I call the member of the European Parliament, Mr. Carlo Ressler. He knows this part of the world quite well. Nice to have you, Carlo, again. National leader of Belarus and head of the United Transitional Cabinet, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Nice to have you. Привет. We call Katie Pavlich, Fox News contributor and townhall.com editor. Hello, Katie. Nice surname you have, very known in this part of the world as well. And we have a lovely lady, two surnames, but she's always one. Yvonne Dodgy-Sorin, Embassy Department Director General of Europe and Economy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Österreich. Grüß Gott. Hallo, herzlich willkommen. And the only guy who can actually ask all the questions with a smile, even though the theme is very dangerous, and it goes SOS, we have a guy from the Catholic University. That means that everything will be settled as it should be. Assistant Professor Jakov Žižić is the moderator. Jakov, please take the stand and join your panel. I'll be your conscience about the time, but you can do it. I know. Enjoy, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, this is working. Thank you. Okay. Hello to everyone. I'm very honored to moderate this panel with very distinguished but diverse speakers. So I will start with one question for each of you. So this will be the first round with question for each of you. So my question is, what are the most important Western values that you would defend? To be defended. To be defended, yes.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Chrissy Houlihan. I serve just outside of the city of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. I'm on the Armed Services and Intel Committee, and have been in Congress for 7 years. When you think about Western values, I think it's sort of a lot of different issue areas. I think you could
But maybe name 3, if you can.
Well, you know, I think the understanding of individualism, the understanding of freedom, which is associated with that, rule of law to some degree as well, to allow us to maintain our individualism and freedom. I think also democratic values. And lastly, I would say there's also an element of capitalism in there as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ressler?
Hello to everyone from my side as well. Well, if it has to be 2 or 3, definitely liberty. Then I'm a lawyer, so rule of law and probably human dignity is something really core.
It would be expected from a Christian Democrat to say human dignity. Thank you. Ms. Tikhanovskaya?
So as I'm from Belarus, where people are really got imprisoned for defense of human rights, security, and freedom of speech, so maybe I will name these 3.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pavlich?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much to the government of Croatia for inviting me here today. My great-grandparents went to America in the early 1900s from just a few miles down the road, so I can't imagine they would think their great-granddaughter would be sitting here today speaking to all of you in this important forum about these issues facing Europe, America, and the rest of the world. So thank you very much, first and foremost. The Western values, of course, can be discussed in many different ways in a number of different forums, but there have been many books written about it. But first, I would say sovereignty is key to Western civilization and Western values. Freedom of speech individualism and freedom in general to be yourself and to speak out against your government. And I would say free and fair elections. The United States is a republic. We hear a lot about democracy. There's a little bit of a difference. But freedom of speech is one that is, I know, a topic of our conversation today, and I think that we'll discuss that later, but a big one.
Thank you, and I will say in Croatia, Ms. Tončić, sorry.
Thank you. So also from my side for this really topical discussion today, we saw how important it is to have this discussion today. On your question, I think it is, the values are interlinked anyway, and there is no hierarchy at all. But when it comes to defend them, I would say start by democracy. Democracy, rule of law, and independent judiciary. I think these are key to ensure the other values. So these are the things I would look at first. Thank you.
So we heard a lot of common values to all of our speakers. So Ms. Houlihan, in Western society, there is a challenge and issue of immigration that is very debated and divisive issue. There is a strong pressure to stop out-of-control immigration, to restrict immigration. Do you think that more controlled immigration policies are compatible with Western values? And also, what about policies that protect jobs and industries within nation? Are those Western values, or as some say, like nativism, xenophobia, illiberalism, national exclusivism? How do you see it?
There's a lot of questions. What I would say is I am the daughter of an immigrant as well. My dad came from Poland. He survived the Holocaust and came with his mom, who was the only other person who survived alongside him, to the New York City area in 1946, I believe it was, when he was 5 or so years old. So he came in the traditional and legal way, and I am very much supportive of that method. But I also very much am in support of the fact that there are situations, dire situations, where things like declaring that you need to have sanctuary is a fair way also of thinking about immigration. We in the United States are wrestling, as are many countries around the world, with an immigration issue and problem. We need to solve for this problem because we in the United States, just like many other nations, are decreasing in population naturally, and we need to continue to be a welcoming place, like the place that welcomed my dad, who served more than 20 years in the U.S. Navy, who is an amazingly successful citizen, and whose daughter, one generation later, is a member of Congress. And I believe that we have the appetite and the will, or should have the appetite and the will in the United States to solve for this problem without violating human rights, without sort of the draconian methodologies that we're seeing, because we are a humane and caring and Judeo-Christian based country as well.
So you would, let's say, you would link Judeo-Christian values with this hospitality and towards immigrants.
But there is a complicated situation here when you talk about the subject that we're talking about. Judeo-Christian values, I think, are very much central to a lot of the things that we're talking about, but so is secularism. So is the separation of church and state. And I think that's something that's slipping away from countries like the United States as well as other countries that we're here talking about.
And regarding this issue of, let's say, more like if you propose that industries and jobs stay within the nation, let's say if you reject some kind of economic globalism, how would you see it? Is it also...
Again, I do believe it's the responsibility of the government to protect the sovereignty of a country. Very much agree with that, and to protect the vitality and vibrancy of the economy of that country. But I do believe that we are all very much interconnected, and it's almost impossible to tease those things apart, even if we'd like to. And things like nationalism and those kinds of things, we've seen this play before. We have literally seen this play before in World War II, amongst other conflicts, where we we cannot return back to the history that we all know, particularly in this part of the world. My dad's from Ukraine, or what was Poland and now Ukraine. We know what this looked like generations ago, 80 years ago. He's now 83, and we cannot repeat this.
Okay. Mr. Ressler, the Western world has experienced what we call cultural revolution from 1960s onwards, with more and more people embracing these progressive, individualistic, and cosmopolitan values. We also had anthropological revolution that placed emphasis on individual autonomy on a pedestal of the values. But in recent years, we see some kind of cultural counter-revolution, or maybe cultural backlash, is taking place in the Western world. Do you see this value shift maybe in the politics of the European Union? And what was the impact of 2024 European Parliament elections that changed this political landscape of the European Parliament?
Well, there is definitely no doubt that we are in some kind of really serious political, social, broader upheaval. Quite a significant change and transformation, which we see also in the US, but to some extent in Europe as well. But at the same time, I would really be cautious in trying to adopt that kind of labels of counter-revolution, because I think that reality is more complex than this, and I think that this is evident in the European Parliament these days as well. In the elections of the last year, and I think that we are now maybe a few weeks in the second year of our mandate in the European Parliament, this shift to the right was visible to some extent. You can see also changes in terms of some kind of a conservative shift to some extent also among younger voters, among voters in general. You can see also this even revival of Christian faith and higher levels of church attendance, for instance, or some kind of new even Christian religion practice among younger people, especially among Generation Z. But I would not really call it as something that is very structured. So I would say that it's more something like a fragmented reaction to the decline of the values and of the atomization that we're also witnessing. And we are now in this phase where, in the European Parliament, for instance, it is becoming more and more fragmented. You can see this kind of tribalism in many different situations. This week even we had also this resolution on the remembrance of the communist victims in Slovenia, something that was quite divisive, and you could really see that clear ideological line just near the EPP. So all the political groups that are left to the EPP on such a really civilizational topic do not see it in the same way. So I think that that kind of fragmentation is something that definitely exists, and I would say that perhaps you can also say that you see part of this shift toward the conservative side, but at the same time it is not so black and white. You know that from the EPP you have three different political groups which are on the right of us in the European Parliament, and
you can make majority with them.
But it is theoretically, yes, and on some topics such as migration, such as security, such as defense, this is possible sometimes. But at the same time, you won't have that kind of majority on the European budget. You won't have that kind of majority on the geostrategic issues we are facing with. And this is a huge difference, and then it really makes this majority only a theoretical possibility. But at the same time, I think that we're also in the situation in which it is not possible that the situation continues as it did in the past mandate, to really try to ignore the realities of the elections, but also to try to ignore the realities of the geopolitical sphere and all this huge transformation which is happening. So, but I wanted to say that really there are reasons why you have even three parties, three political groups in the European Parliament right of the EPP. They have their own significant differences, and I don't think it's really possible to frame everything into that kind of dichotomy, I would say really false binary dichotomy of progressive cosmopolites on one side and angry on the other. I think it's much deeper than this, and perhaps we can also touch upon this a bit later.
Okay. Ms. Pavlic, do you think that, from your US perspective, of course, that Western values are increasingly dominated by progressive, liberal, and cosmopolitan values and policies and ethos that tend to exclude or marginalize conservative and Christian values and policies?
No, quite frankly, I think that Western values have been torn down in a lot of ways by the big cities, by the more urban environments, and they have decided that rural America is a part of the country that is racist, xenophobic, and shouldn't have as much of a voice, given that they don't have as many college degrees or aren't as sophisticated maybe as those in the big cities and on the coast who do. I want to talk about the sovereignty issue for just a second, because you asked about whether Western values are compatible with stopping illegal immigration and sovereignty. And not only are they compatible, but they're essential to keeping our countries with Western values and to keep it so that they are a reflection of the people who are citizens of that country. What President Trump has was that the majority of Americans were tired of seeing millions and millions of illegal immigrants coming into the country. The former president allowed something like 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants who broke the law. We talk about rule of law when it comes to Western values. That was completely thrown out the window. And so this president listened to people from all across the country, in big cities and in rural America, and won every single swing state in the country based on the idea that he believes that citizenship should mean something, and that the rule of law when it comes to illegal immigration should be upheld. And that's what you're seeing with his policies being carried out. So I think that we've seen with the cosmopolitan left, as you say, in America, they've for many, many years operated in academic theories and gotten completely out of touch with the average person in America, which is why they lost the 2024 election and why you saw pretty much every sector of politics move to the right across the country in the previous election. It's also why you're seeing President Trump's approval ratings stay steady, and he has a majority approval on a number of these issues that he's carrying out that the cosmopolitan left says are controversial, that the media deems as racist or incoherent with American values. He's doing what he said he would do on the campaign trail when it comes to these issues of upholding Western values, upholding the sovereignty of the country, reestablishing what it means to be a citizen, and then, quite frankly, going to places like NATO and requiring the same of our European partners who we say over and over again have the same shared values. So I would say that's the perspective on your question.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tsikhanouskaya, you and many other Belarusian politicians were forced into exile. We Croats, we also have experience with exile. Many of our politicians and dissidents were in the exile during the communist dictatorship. Interesting that communist Yugoslavia enjoyed sympathies and support among different circles in the West, because there were some distorted images of Yugoslavia as a liberal socialist country. Is there any support and sympathy for Lukashenko's regime in the West, perhaps among socialist and other leftist actors, or this regime is unanimously regarded as a dictatorship?
So here I will start with the words of gratitude, to all the parties and all the governments who for 5 years stand firm and principled with democratic forces of Belarus fighting against dictatorship. And we as Belarusian Democratic Forces, we are working with all parties and governments across the political spectrum, from socialists to conservatives. For example, we have been both at the European Socialist Convention in Malaga and European People's Party Convention in Valencia. And I have to say that Belarusian topic is uniting people, uniting parliaments, different parties, uniting governments. For example, we have groups for groups of friendship for democratic Belarus in 26 parliaments. It's, you know, it's rather non-conventional approach, because usually these groups of friendship are working with government, but we people whose country is seized by dictator Lukashenko, and Lukashenko is isolated. He is not recognized as legitimate, and governments and parliaments, they are taking this non-conventional step, working with us. They strengthen agents of democratic forces of Belarus. And here I see the president of PASE, President Rosopoulos. You know that Council of Europe, they kicked out Russia and Belarusian regime from Council of Europe and started to work with democratic forces of Belarus. It's also a very non-orthodox approach, but we see that modern politicians are ready to do this, to show that we are not going to appease dictators. We are not going to tolerate their brutality. And actually, I have to say that today it's not fight maybe between rights and lefts, you know, as you say, but it fights between those who respect freedoms and between those who can tolerate tyranny, between those who think that human rights or freedom is optional, and between those who think that it's sacred. It's more like moral battle at the moment, and I see that today's society is winning this moral battle.
So you're, let's say, in better position than pro-democratic leaders of Croatian exiles in that time. It's good for you. Ms. Tončić, so we often hear that the European project is under attack. So according to you, to your view, who threatens values and norms of the European project? Who are the challengers, and what do they challenge and undermine? Is the confidence in the European project shaken, maybe even gone?
Well, talking about values in context with the European Union is a little bit a different discussion than we had before, because values in the European Union are precisely defined. They are defined in the Treaty of the European Union, they are listed, and they are protected by law. So this is not a societal discussion, it is not an ethical discussion, it is not a philosophical discussion. We have a list of European values that the EU as an institution and all member states have to implement. And therefore, we have to ask, how come that these values like democracy and respecting the rule of law, respecting equality and so on, is in the treaties? It is because in the EU, there was a kind of consensus, societal consensus on the existence of these values. So member states were able and willing to implement them jointly, and to also ensure that they are implemented and safeguarded. So this is a little bit different. So when we talk about breaking or threatening these values, you always have to look whether these are threats from within or threats from outside. And threats from within, of course, the main challenge is whether there is still this consensus on the existence of these values. So, for example, equality among all groups of society is questioned more and more. Yeah? Rule of law is questioned more and more. Why? Because there are governments that are not pursuing the way of a liberal democracy. They are pursuing the way of illiberal democracy. So these are threats from within. The threats from outside, I would say that, of course, this is a variety of threats. They are in purpose, but they also happen. In purpose, of course, it's foreign interference of many kinds. There are so many kinds of foreign interference, and they are politically motivated to erode our European way of life, as we call it. And the European way of life, as you all know, are a result of these values. Yeah? and then there are also dynamics with social media, for example, that simply change the perception of the society of what values are. And so I would say these are the two main elements that we have to look at when we talk about threats to our values.
Thank you. Ms. Houlihan, there's a strong, let's say, national conservative MAGA movement in the United States. Do you see this movement in odds with the Western values?
I think that it is in response, as you mentioned, to a feeling, and as Ms. Pavlich mentioned, a feeling of othering, that people are feeling that they're being othered and picked upon. And honestly, I think the same thing can be said about why we're here. We're here because a lot of people in our society, and I'm sure in the European society and other societies that value these same things, feel as though they want to be treated equally. They want to be treated with dignity and respect. And the MAGA movement, I think, comes from that, kind of this feeling of misunderstanding and othering. I do worry, you know, obviously full disclosure, I come from the Democratic side of the spectrum. I do worry that it is destructive to our nation and to what we consider to be the kind of topic that we're talking about right now. But I also am hopeful that this is a pendulum swing that will hopefully readjust, and that we will be able to find our commonalities again. I really do want to push back on the otherism in general that we hear coming from our country, my country, as well as many countries here. We will not win this battle for the hearts and souls and minds of the world if we fight each other. And if we sit there and snipe at each other about who did what and when they did it, and rather we sit down and we solve for these problems. I also really think we won't do anything as legislators, and many of us here on this stage are, if we don't have the people understand their responsibility and their obligation in this, that they are responsible, no matter what their education is, for being thoughtful and participatory parts of our society. And right now, I'm not sure everybody is, at least in the United States, really engaged in seeking truth and seeking common ground and seeking talking to one another. And this speaks to what you were speaking about, which is the media is not helping, and malign influences are not helping. They are doing nothing other than trying to divide us. And if we can't figure this out, it will be at our peril. And that's one of the things that I think is most dangerous that's happening, not just in the United States, but in other like-minded nations as well. Is like, we gotta stop it with the MAGA and the liberal whatever and the, just knock it off. We're people, we have values. I'm a veteran. I also happen to be a Democrat. I also happen to be a woman. I also happen to be an engineer. Boy, that's a complicated set of things. And you can't pin one thing on me in terms of who I am based on what my party affiliation is.
Okay. Ms. Pavlich, your thoughts about MAGA and Western values, and is maybe MAGA movement possible in Europe?
Well, MAGA stands for Make America Great Again, if none of you are familiar. And it comes from the concept that President Trump has long said, which is America first. He's never advocated for America alone, but he has said, I'm the president of the United States, I'm going to take care of my people and my country first. For too long, we've looked outside our borders and allowed people who are at odds with our values into our country, who aren't interested in upholding our way of life, being true to our Constitution, and we're going to go back and change that, which is why he was able to not just get votes from Republicans, but he also got a lot of votes from Democrats. And he's really reshaped the political dynamic in the United States by bringing a number of different coalitions into the, quote, Republican tent. Make America Great Again, MAGA, is just normal Americans who want their country to do well in the world. They want to be able to make money on their own. They want to be able to take their kids to school. They want to be able to afford what they need for their families. So, of course, it's within Western values. Make America Great Again is a very religious coalition. You have the president who has established a number of prayer coalitions and committees within his administration and made sure that although he understands there's a separation between church and state or synagogue and state, that doesn't mean you take faith out of the public square, and that people should be free in a free country that serves Western values to be able to pray in public, to have their own values, and to be able to go to their churches and synagogues without fear of being persecuted. So Make America Great Again is just simply a coalition of regular, everyday Americans who feel like their needs and their wants and that their desires for a better country, for their country to meet its potential, were not only ignored or pushed aside for many years, but vilified under false smears about who they were, whether they are white Americans, Hispanic Americans, Black Americans. It's a coalition that makes up people who have a number of educational degrees all the way down to simply having high school degrees. Business owners, people from across the political spectrum, from the economic perspective in America. So it's just a coalition made up of a lot of new people to the political process that President Trump has been able, through his common sense discussion to the everyday person, as someone who has spent his life in very high circles, has been able to really redraw the political map and the political landscape in America for the time being.
And is it possible, maybe in Europe, something like that? How do you see it?
I'm not a European, so I'm not sure. I know that we all, the United States has a different constitution than many countries in Europe, but I think the concept of Make America Great Again, you could apply it to any country. Someone was asking about Africa in the previous, what is the White House's perspective on Africa? And I think if you would ask the president, I don't speak for him, but if you were to ask him, he would just say, make Africa great again. I mean, he just thinks that everybody within their own countries or as individuals have the potential to do great things. So whether you're France or Germany or Croatia or any other European country, you have the potential with the resources that you have in your country and your people to make your country what you think it should be based on what the people in your country want.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ressler, there are some people who are saying that this main dividing line in the European politics is not more between social democrats, liberal, Christian democrats, that the main line is whether you are Europeanist or national sovereignist. Interesting is that these national sovereignist forces, they also tend to see themselves, let's say, more Western, that they follow Western and European values more than this Europeanist. How do you see this competition for who is more authentically promoting Western values?
I think I've touched upon this question shortly in the beginning, also in the first answer, especially in the sense that I don't see it so binary. So I think that in the historical tradition of my political group, of the biggest political group in the European Parliament, has been that we have been bridge builders within different societies, within different political structures, political groups, and I think that this is something that in this kind of increasingly polarized, but also sometimes societies which are really becoming more and more forming and functioning as some kind of atomization projects, this is even becoming more relevant. I'm unfortunately painfully aware how difficult it is to balance between these different trends and between these two polarizing blocks. But I really think and feel that this is our mission and that this is now really very much important. So on one side, I definitely see the threat of some kind of technocracy or liberal culturalism in that sense, and I would always put ahead real democracy, but at the same time then from our political tradition we would always also put solidarity ahead of egoism, or in the end community and some kind of sense of belonging ahead of only individualism or that kind of atomization that is unfortunately happening. But the thing is that many people nowadays are at unease with the current state of play, with the current social transformations that are happening, and that are definitely helped and facilitated by this rapid technological transformation. I completely agree that this information environment is not working in our favor, but my impression is that also on your question, on that kind of dilemma between nationalism and Europeanism, I think it's really too simple. This year, for instance, in the European Parliament, we organized the exhibition on the Croatian roots, basically, on the Croatian path to freedom. The exhibition was opened by the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, and actually it told the story of our country, told the story of the homeland war, but at the same time told it in the way and in the perspective of our European integration. I think that coming from a country which really went through that kind of difficult historical struggle, we can understand even better, and we understand it quite well, that we need that kind of coordination, that we need Europe, and that's why I don't see that it's mutually exclusive to believe in nation states, but at the same time also to believe in the European project and to believe in Europe of nations.
Thank you. Ms. Tsikhanouskaya, so we know that people in Belarus are deprived of democracy. They cannot elect and dismiss their government. Their political participation is restrained. But interesting, there is also a tendency among the Western liberal democracies to limit the political power of the people because of their alleged illiberal attitudes and tendencies, etc. As a pro-democratic leader from this authoritarian country, how do you see restraining of political power of people in the Western liberal democracy?
Look, on the one hand, I fully understand why democratic countries are taking steps to protect their elections, to protect information space, or protect their societies from propaganda. Because you know, I think that it's not a tax on freedom of speech, for example, you know, but it's the acts of democratic self-defense. Because if you don't defend democracy and freedoms, it can be turned against you. Because we see how regimes and dictators misuse democratic tools like elections, freedom or laws, to undermine the values that your countries are based on. Let's take, for example, I don't know, social media. Social media have been created to empower civil society, to empower people, to empower freedom of speech, but dictators misuse this instrument, misuse social media to seed lie, to seed division, you know, to spread disinformation, and with this, they poison minds of ordinary people. They try to show democracy as very weak, as you know, slow, and not able to take decisions. And they spread information that, you know, these democracies cannot make any decision. You know, they are too weak for this. And people start to doubt if democracy is good enough, you know, for them. So that's why. You know, it's not a tax on any freedoms. It's, as I said, it's self-defense, and it should be, this step should be made, you know, to defend the values. Because what's happening in Belarus is not just, you know, restriction of political will or restriction of elections. It's absence of any rights, of any freedoms, and of course it cannot be compared with the democratic countries. But we see how easily people in democracies can be subjugated by these narratives, and they are looking for simple solutions to difficult questions, and they might believe to populists, you know, and they start believing that, you know, why do we have to help those who are in need or those who are protecting their values? We live with our wonderful lives, you know, in democratic countries. We shouldn't care about Ukraine, we shouldn't care about Belarus, Moldova. It's their business, you know, but as you know from your history, you know from Milosevic times, whom actually Lukashenko called his best friend, that defending of democracy is not a national issue. It's regional and worldwide, actually. So that's why stopping this propaganda, stopping these dictators from misusing democratic instruments is very important in these difficult and turbulent times.
Okay. Ms. Pavlich, how do you, from US perspective, see this defense of democracy in Europe by, let's say, banning certain parties, by excluding certain parties from government, from political discussions? Can democracy be crushed by disinformations in social media?
Well, there's no doubt that bad actors like Russia, China, Iran do everything they can to sow disinformation, especially in democracies. That's what they do. They have entire government agencies dedicated to disrupting what they don't like, which is Western values and representative republics and democracies. However, the response to that is not to continue feeding the censorship industrial complex, which actually is a tool of anti-Western states like Russia, China, Iran, and others, by saying that, well, a democratic population in a democratic country where people vote and have political parties and debate is to then take away their tools to have those discussions and to use their own minds to make their own decisions about what kind of countries they want. The other thing is canceling elections in democracies, or upending election results in democracies or republics is not a way to combat the very people you say are sowing misinformation or disinformation. It actually is feeding into exactly what they're trying to do, which is to make you more like them. If you are saying that your citizenry, which elects you, who you are supposed to represent, is not capable enough or smart enough to make their own decisions for you then to go vote on their behalf, maybe you should think about a different career path. Of course, there are bad actors who want to do things and try to put bad ideas and poisonous ideas into societies. But we've seen this happen in the United States, where we have a First Amendment and a Constitution, and the previous administration wanted to go around that and was pressuring private companies, private social media companies, to ban doctors who had different opinions on COVID-19, to ban political opponents who they didn't like what they had to say, to try to throw their opponents in prison because they were too afraid that if the current president won again, that democracy would end in America. Well, there are more people voting in America now than ever before, and we have a new president. Elections will happen next year, just like they always do. So this idea that somehow we can't allow people to have access to tools like social media because they're not smart enough to digest the information that they're seeing, the solution to bad ideas and to dangerous ideas that come from anti-Western forces is not to limit the ability for Western people to get that kind of information and to talk about it on the internet, to talk about it in the public square. I mean, a part of this panel today is talking about the Vice President's speech at the Munich Security Council. Well, he went through a list of things where European countries are throwing normal citizens in prison, not for hate speech or for being violent, but for criticizing government officials, or for posting jokes online, or for saying that they're not for a feminist movement. That is actually playing directly into the hands of the very forces that Western values and democracies are supposed to protect against. So censorship is not the answer to the bad forces that would like to take over Western democracies. It plays right into their hands.
Thank you. And Ms. Toncic, sorry. So EU likes to promote itself as a community of values. Do you think that these values are universalistic and acceptable to everyone, especially regarding enlargement of the European Union? Are there limits of enlargement regarding this applicability of these EU values?
So European values, they derive from the values that have been defined after the two wars of the 20th century and the lessons that we learned from the 20th century wars particularly. So I think these lessons should be universal. And I have a little bit of a problem with calling them Western values, because all over the world countries share these values, and they are not only Western, but I know that it is a term that is usually used, but these fundamental values, they are shared all over the world to a different degree. This is also the basis of the UN Charter and so on. Within the European Union, we have the Charter of the Fundamental Rights, and they also ensure that the citizens can enjoy the values and the rights that are enshrined in the treaty. These values, as I said at the beginning, they are not just nice to have. They are fundamental to the functioning of the European Union. If member states do not share these values and do not implement these values and do not make sure that all the citizens can enjoy the rights deriving from these values, the European Union will not function anymore, because we are being a union of values means being a legally intertwined union. In Croatia, a citizen must be sure that he can go to the court in Lithuania and have the same rights as if he was here in Croatia. Also, all the business community, they are depending on having one single market where the rules are the same for everyone. Having said this, of course, also member states who want to join the European Union, they have to abide to these values and to all these principles that are enshrined in the treaty. They are also, of course, Copenhagen criteria, and so there is no discussion. Yes, they have to make sure that these values and rights are ensured.
Thank you. So we have 15 minutes left. We had very fruitful and interesting discussion. So I'll now open the floor for your questions. I hope there will be questions, because we had very interesting remarks. So the floor is open. We have two questions. First, gentleman there, if there is a microphone. Okay, there is.
Arriving.
And the second one is Mr. Stier.
Okay. Oh, compadre.
Hola. Thank you very much to all of you, but allow me to spread a little criticism. Because of all the panel, how many of you think you had an answer for any young people that is thriving for values and for answers? Because we've been speaking freedom of speech, and I know, and I really like what Kati have said, because it was under siege in a country. And then you have to implement the tools. But what do you think the answers will be for our young generations on Westerners that need something to defend, and we're still talking for 40 years, freedom of speech, rule of law, and all the others? It really compels to me to see what kind of society I have to defend. I have to defend. So thank you. I hope I made myself clear. And I fully agree with everything you've said. But to me, it's still a pending question. There is a generational gap.
I'm just not sure I understand the question. Are you asking what the solution is for these?
There are different values that came into stage. Patriotism, nobody talk about.
Oh yeah, no, trust me, I have a list which includes the scientific method. That's
why questions are for.
Yeah,
just to see.
Thank you. He asked for 3, and I think it was really, really telling that so many of us hit on the same 3 roughly, speaking. But there really is a whole lot more that is under attack in terms of our Western values as well. When we are undermining innovation, when we are, taking away I'm an engineer, as I mentioned. I'm also a former chemistry teacher. When we are denying science, those kinds of things are super scary too, and they undermine Western values too. And if you look at some of the conflicts that are happening between what would be, and I agree with you, traditionally Western values and whatever the antithesis of that is, the kind of methodology of finding truth is being undermined right now. And no one, at least I am not, suggesting that social media be stopped. No one is suggesting that. But I am suggesting that part of what's undermining and eroding our society is that. And so I would say one of the things that needs to be done is to make sure that we continue, especially in places like the US and in Europe, to invest in the future, invest in innovation, invest in science and technology.
Ms. Toncic, sorry, you wanted to add?
Yes, I don't know if it's working or not.
Yeah, it's working.
Yes, it is. I think on the freedom of speech and what you also said about kind of cutting or regulating, over-regulating. I think we are in a transition period as regards the regulation of social media. There is no simple answer to this, neither in the sense let's have censorship, nor in the sense let's have the forces go wild and free. We have to be aware that what we have in civil law protecting individuals from interference and from aggression from other people also applies to social media. And we have to find ways to transmit or transform this to the regulations of social media. It is not allowed in real life, let's put it that way, to incite, to slaughter, to insult. It is not allowed to deny Holocaust, things like that. You cannot do this, and we have to make sure that we also have the same rules applicable in the sphere of social media. We are still on the way. Nobody talks about censorship. I think it is about protection. And wait just 1 second. And then I also want to make a differentiation between a systemic problem with, for example, the rule of law, and a country that has systemically deficits in its democracy and its rule of law, or a country that has here and there a problem. And we just saw these days the Commission reports on the rule of law in the European Union. You have no member state where the Commission doesn't say there is a problem. But there are only very few where the Commission says there is a systemic problem. And this is where we have to prevent that countries go along the path to have a systemic problem in their democracy. And this is why prevention is as important, and I think, for example, regulating the social media is as important as corrective measures in the case that really a systemic threat is there. Thank you.
Mr. Lester, then Ms. Pavlic.
Listen, I would really say that your, does it work? I would say that your question really underlines once again that we are living in that kind of society, which is dominated by polarization, by fragmentation, by atomization, and that we lost some kind of ground, some kind of roots which really united us in the past. This has not happened now since the last European elections or since the win of Donald Trump in the US. But this is part of the process which really lasted for decades. So I think that without strong ground, strong foundations, it will be difficult to continue, to organize ourselves, to organize the politics, And I see this as deeply concerning, because I would say that we are really drifting apart, both within our societies, but then also at the same time between the US and Europe. I mean, we have sort of started from the similar traditions. We had many historical differences as well, but I would say that now we are diverging significantly, but this is not something that is happening only within transatlantic relations, but I really unfortunately see these trends in our home societies as well. So I would say that one of the problem is definitely, and that we really cannot allow ourselves to live in some kind of empty shell without real values, without real roots, and with some kind of really ruthlessness. But at the same time, I don't have really a magic solution for how to really solve it, especially because this information environment is also making this problem even worse.
Okay, Ms. Pavlic.
So I would say that just because governments or government officials aren't saying we are for censorship doesn't mean that they're not doing it under a different name. I mean, the EU passed the Digital Services Act last year, which allows for governments to arrest citizens for basic insults that they find hurt people's feelings on the internet. And a key component of Western society and Western values is having logical thinking. And that is being thrown out the window when it comes to a lot of this censorship regime and industrial complex that has been implemented in Europe and that certain factions have tried to implement in the United States. So just because people don't say, we are for censorship, doesn't mean that it's not actually happening with very serious decrees and enforcement by the state against citizens in a number of different countries. To your question, though, about young people, I think young people should be proud of where they come from. They should be proud of their Judeo-Christian heritage, which upholds Western society. And it's okay to be part of the EU or to be part of NATO, to be a citizen of the world, to be, as an American, we're an ocean away from you, so it feels like we're a little bit, separated sometimes. You can be part of these global institutions, but also be very proud of where you come from. You can be proud of being an American, being proud of being an Italian or Croatian. So being proud of where you come from and your culture and your personal history gives you something to stand up for and to fight for. And I think that if Europe and America too doesn't find their way back to those basic principles of who they are and where they come from, their own democracies, their republics, and the future of their Western values are going to be severely eroded if they don't get back to those basics of being proud of where they come from and the people who came before them.
Mr. Ressel, very shortly.
Really short intervention, just to say that obviously I share the concern for the worrying trend in terms of the freedom of speech that has been happening for some time in a way that the public sphere and the real freedom of speech has become, unfortunately, increasingly limited. I have to say also that it doesn't have much to do with the DSA. DSA doesn't censor, and the idea is really to make something which is illegal offline, make it illegal also online. But I don't think that we have now time for this kind of discussion. But I would just like to say that unfortunately part of the problem, or even the biggest problem, even started at the American campuses with really that kind of trends and that kind of atmosphere, which unfortunately has, honestly led to the decreased freedom of speech.
And finally, Mr. Stier.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting panel. And I have one comment and one question related to it. I think when it comes to the Western values, one distinct value is that the state is not controlling the society. And this is what we can find in the West. And it's a product, if you want, of what found in the ancient Greece, in Athens, with the idea, revolutionary idea, that the people can rule, democracy, in the rule of law of the Roman Republic, and then in the revolutionary idea of Christianity, that we give God's what is God's, and the emperor's what is the emperor. So this division between the spiritual and the temporal power, which brings me to the fact that I think that we got into trouble in the West when the state started to try to regulate what should be a free space for the society. When Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America was saying the great value of the communities that were generating solidarity, that were actually generating also the sense of identity and patriotism, somehow the state started to regulate a lot, defining by 1 or 2 votes in parliamentary assemblies what is the definition of family, what is the definition of this and that, etc. Instead of leaving that to the society, to the actors in the society, yes, also to the religious communities to define. So my question related to it is, sometimes probably less is more, and it would be better to avoid cultural wars for the state to focus on what is actually the core business of politics and the state. Are we in the West going into that direction now? Do we have any hope into going back into that direction and then to reestablish what is the true Western values, or we are headed into the opposite direction?
Just
that
to support your remark, it was the Stalin who said, "La société et moi." It was just as you said. Okay, I will now allow very short answer, final answer on this remark question of Mr. Stier. So starting with you, Mr. Holohan.
Brilliant question, and what I would say from my brief perspective, having never run for anything or served in politics at all before I became a member of Congress, I am hopeful that there still is an opportunity in places like the United States, and my understanding is in places like Croatia, where we have very slim majorities and minorities. This is not a mandate for any one party or any 3 parties or 5 parties or 7 parties. The American people are within several votes on the House side and in the Senate side as well, and that might change in another year and a half as it did when I came into office. And so I believe that we shouldn't be taking these huge swings back and forth and continually clubbing each other with the things, the moral superiority that we have, whatever value system that we believe we have that is superior to somebody else's value system. I am hopeful that the middle is here. I will tell you that there's a congressional delegation that is here right now that is pretty middle. And the problem is you've probably never heard of any of us. And that's, I think, the biggest problem, is that instead what we're hearing from is from the far left and the far right of our country, probably the same here and in the rest of Europe, and the media. And that's making the rest of us fight one another. And I would say to the gentleman's question in the back, what's the solution or whatever, civility and decency is also a core Western value. And stopping, picking on each other is really, really important. Individual responsibility is a core Western value too.
Thank you. Mr. Ressler?
I agree with the question as well, in a way that the problems of Europe, but also the problems of the US, go much beyond the culture wars, and sometimes they really just mask the difficult choices that we all have to do in Europe as well. And that's why I hope that it will be possible to really overcome it. But as I said earlier, I think it's quite difficult, and we will all have to do our share in the sense of really having the dialogue, trying to build bridges between different people. I think that this has been a mission of my party in the past, and I think that we are now even more invited to double down on the same values and on the same bridge building mission.
Ms. Tsikhanouskaya?
I have to say that it's very difficult, to explain people who enjoy democracy every day why they have to defend this democracy, because it's like air for them. So for me, it's extremely important to show young people especially, to societies in democratic countries, what they might get if they will not put efforts to defend democracy. They can get Lukashenko, Putin, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's important to show that people are dying for the values that your countries are based on. People getting sentences of 10, 15, 20 years in jail because they want to enjoy freedom of speech that you enjoy every day. For people to have possibility to compare. Because, democracy is like religion. it's like something in the air, but if you don't believe in this, it will just disappear. So give examples to your young people. Remind yourself about your moral responsibility to contribute into that societies that are sacrificing their freedom and lives to get what you have. And in this case, only in this case, you will be able to cherish and to defend and protect democracies in your countries.
Thank you. Ms. Pavlic?
Well, as a daughter of the American Revolution, I very much appreciate that. People who came before us fought really hard for the freedoms that we have, and it's our responsibility to continue fighting for them. I'll leave you with two quotes from one of my favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan, who, of course, ended the Cold War. First, he said some of the most dangerous words and alarming words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And I think that can be used as a guide for a lot of these questions we have today. And he also said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And I think that even if we have disagreements, we all believe that freedom is a really important thing and that we have to fight for it. And I think all of us are willing to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Tončić-Sorin?
Yes. Well, politics has the responsibility to ensure the necessary frameworks, legal frameworks for the civil society, for other governmental actors and non-governmental actors, and for the citizens to move within these boundaries. And of course, this does not take the responsibility from each and every single individual to contribute to maintaining the values and to passing them on. And this is also relevant for something that you said. You really need competent citizens, who are really able to judge, as also Mrs. Tichanowskaja said. You need citizens who are really able and competent to make a distinction between what is right, what is correct, and what is a lie. And so, yes, the government has the responsibility to ensure a good education, to provide good schools, to provide the freedom, to provide good, free media, good media landscape, for example. These are the frameworks, and you cannot say that the government can leave this to the free market, because these are essential for the functioning of a democracy.
Okay, thank you. And I think that I can conclude that we all agreed that freedom of conscience, freedom of opinion, and freedom of speech are the Western values that must be defended. Thank you all.
Thank you, dear panelists, for joining us. Nice panel, a lot of things to share. We have a short break so we can prepare the last party of the day with our OECD partners. So we start at 6 sharp. Please be here so we can do everything properly. Thanks. Dame I gospodo, kratki predah, nastavljamo od 18 sati kako bismo završili sa ovim dugim, ali uspješnim danom. Hvala.